Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to the Week 12 edition of Establish the Run's First Look Show. I'm Gary Hartman. Sorry for the delay here. Was having some technical issues on my end, but happy to be with you here, even if a little bit late, to go through a quick first look at the Week 12 main slate. Just getting that off the front. We will have Thanksgiving content, a lot of free Thanksgiving content for you all at Establish the Run. There will be Establish a Million with Mike Leone and Drew Dinkmeyer tonight. I believe that will be free on the same YouTube page you're watching this on right now. And I believe we also will have, let me just confirm this, and Establish the Show on Wednesday. So be sure, Wednesday we'll have Establish a Show free on YouTube, and tonight we'll have Establish a Million free on YouTube. So Establish a Show with Adam, Evan, and Wiggins will be on Wednesday, and both of those will be free for the 3-game Thanksgiving slate, which we will not be talking about today. And those teams are obviously off this main slate. So despite the fact that we have no buys here in Week 12, we do have a similar size slate, 11 games once again here, and that's because of the 3 Thursday games and the normal 3 or two extra primetime games. So teams that are not on this slate are the Lions and Bills. They play at 12:30 on Thursday. So no Josh Allen, no Bill stacks. The Giants and Cowboys are the afternoon game on Thanksgiving. So, obviously the Cowboys coming off that beatdown. No, you don't have to worry about that. Daniel Dimes is very good. Don't have to worry about including him. And then the Vikings and Patriots play on Thursday night. So they're off the slate. And then the 2 regular Sunday and Monday night games are Eagles-Packers on Sunday night and Steelers-Colts on Monday night. So all of those teams are off the slate. Just kind of macro view, taking a look at this slate again, for the main slate here, 11 games, not many super high over-unders once again. I think the highest is Cardinals-Chargers at 48 or so. Raiders Seattle's 47.5, and then you got a bunch in the mid-40s. You got Chiefs Chargers at 44, Texans Dolphins at like 45.5. So not a ton of high projected game totals, which is definitely something to keep in mind here. Another thing is, I think, just taking a first look here, that pricing is a little bit looser than it has been. Obviously, it's been really tight the last couple of weeks. A lot of people playing double tight end and, having to do some weird things to fit the players that they want, especially in cash. I don't think it is quite like that this week, although we'll see how the week shakes out from here. All right. So let's talk at quarterback off the top here. Obviously, at the top there, you see Patrick Mahomes, who's been an absolute beast. The model of consistency here has Patrick Mahomes been in 2022. He's your MVP favorite to start the season. They're at home against the Rams, which, in previous years, we would say that's not the best matchup. I do think the Rams still have a good pass rush, but this Rams team is broken at this point. Their 2022 season is, for all intents and purposes, over. I do think in Arrowhead, they've been protecting Patrick pretty well. Patrick's a really good play here. Now, the question is going to be about his receivers and who's available. Obviously, walking hamstring injury, Kadarius Toney did leave the game early on Sunday night. Juju's still dealing with the concussion. McCall Hardman's on IR. I guess MVS is going to be their healthiest receiver right now of the main guys. Not obviously should have Travis Kelce, who he has the best connection with in the world. All that to be said, I'm not too worried about that. I want to be playing plenty of Patrick Mahomes here at home, who is matchup proven. We saw in a game with a tough pass rush against San Francisco, he had 31 points. He basically puts a 30 spot up every single week. After that, I like Lamar definitely this week against Jacksonville. We're due for a big Lamar game. We really have not seen it since weeks 2 and 3 when he had those 2 40-point explosions. He's basically been Aaron Rodgers since then, a lot of 16 through 20s. That's disappointing for Lamar, especially on the contract year. The offense just hasn't been able to get going in the way that I think they were hoping that it would be able to. But we know what these ceiling cases are for Lamar. And we saw this past week, he only came through with 3% ownership or so on the DraftKings Millie maker in a game matchup with Carolina. Obviously, it didn't materialize. But from a GPP perspective, if he's going to keep falling through the cracks ownership-wise, I think Lamar is in a pretty good spot. Fields, I'm not even going to talk about because he's got the shoulder dislocation that was reported yesterday. Definitely might miss this week. Either way, I think it would be enough of a tiebreaker and a really tough matchup going into MetLife to face a tough Jets defense, that I'd be less interested than I have been with him being priced up this week. Herbert, on the other hand, looked pretty good coming out of the bye. Did throw the ball 30 times, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns with losing Mike Williams again, basically. So, I think now you get a matchup in Arizona. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo throw all over this team last night. I think it's a pretty good matchup, pretty good spot here for Justin Herbert. So, I would be into it at 7K, and I think that a lot of people are going to be clicking names below and above him. I don't know how much he'll be owned, but I'm curious for sure. Tua gets the Texans. We know Tua's been in play all season. Tua doubles are once again in play here this week. Kyler, if he comes back, is under 7K. I don't know. I mean, the Chargers have been disappointing from a defensive perspective. We saw what Mahomes did to them. I just coming off if he's not 100%, we've seen Kyler play at not 100% in these back halves of seasons over the last couple of years, and he's not the same player. Not as willing to use his legs and all that stuff. So I'd be less willing to use Kyler this week, even if he plays. I definitely like Joe Burrow, against the Titans. The problem here is the mismatch from the defensive to offensive line. Bengals offensive line is still bad. Interior of the Titans defensive line really strong. So, if they get too much pressure on him, on the road, it could be a long day for Burrow. But we saw a similar situation this past week where Pittsburgh has a strong pass rush. And it was in Pittsburgh, and he still put up 37 points, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. So he can get the ball out quick, and if they can figure out ways to max protect, if they need to do that, I think Burrow can be just fine. Gino, back off the bye here, gets a home matchup with the Raiders, is a really good play at 6K. He'd probably be my favorite spend down option of the week because, after that, you have just a bunch of guys that are Tom Brady against Cleveland at his sub 6K coming off the bye. I mean, we know he's got those 4 touchdown performances in his range. You just haven't seen it this year. But the matchup with Cleveland's not bad. And then, from there, you got Mariota against Washington, who seems to put himself with a nice floor every single week, and he's cheap, but I question the ceiling. And that's pretty much it for me at quarterback this week. Heineke gets Atlanta. He's been doing a good job, but I don't think he's good enough for a fantasy ceiling perspective. So interesting quarterback week. Definitely a lot of options you can dive into here. And we'll be talking more about them throughout the week. All right. Going over to running back, we have Christian McCaffrey leading the way pricing wise. We saw a very nice game out of him last night where they then didn't really have to use him too much on the ground, trying to keep his body healthy for the high leverage games, hopefully for playoff games, which makes a ton of sense. Obviously, they gave up a lot to get him, but was running very effectively, did catch 7 balls through the air last night. I think any game in which the game will be close and Mike Shanahan will be forced to leave him on the field, Kyle Shanahan. I think, his ceiling is sky high, and he still has this floor, 17 points, just by being out there for a regular amount of snaps. Gets a matchup with New Orleans here. I think that's a fine spot at home. If you can afford it, go for it. Eckler remains maybe the highest floor running back on the year due to his pass catching floor. And we didn't even see him catch passes in this last game, only 2 for 17 through the air. That will come back up to his normal 8+ targets that we've been so used to seeing, I would imagine, this week in Arizona, in a matchup that you definitely like to attack. We were just talking about Christian McCaffrey catching balls through the air against this team last night. So Eckler, another great spend up option. Derrick Henry against the Bengals, I think is fine. Najee Harris had a lot of success against them last week. I think Henry and Chubb both probably won't come with too much ownership. I like Henry over Nick Chubb this week. Nick Chubb gets the Tampa Bay Bucks team that has been great at stopping the run for years. And even if they aren't the same as they have been in most of this Tom Brady era, they're still a pretty good run defense. They're coming off a bye. They'll be refreshed. Chubb's coming off a battle with the Bills. So I don't love Nick Chubb this week. Josh Jacobs against Seattle. Seattle's been giving up a ton of big chunk plays to running backs all year. We saw him did cross the 100-yard mark again in week 11. I definitely think that was part of the Raiders' game plan to establish it early and set the tone there. So, somebody that's in play for you there. Kamara against the Niners, I'm a little bit less intrigued by. Tough matchup in San Francisco. Might have to abandon the run at some point early, but if they do, he can get it done through the air. So I'm not ruling him out, but he's definitely not someone that I'm running to in cash or even in tournaments. Mixon dealing with a concussion, so we'll wait on that, see what's going on there. Could be a lot of value in Samaje Perine if Mixon misses. Kenneth Walker was the cover boy here of the top plays video thumbnail. We've seen these 30-point ceiling games out of him, and this is a really good matchup against Vegas at home. We saw a 30-point game against the Chargers, 30-point game against Arizona. And we know that he basically has an elite workload right now. They had to abandon the run pretty early in this game. He wasn't efficient on the ground, and they turned to the pass a little bit, but did catch 8 balls still to, salvage, or catch 6 balls and 8 targets to salvage his floor a little bit. I love Kenneth Walker this week. I'm sure he'll be a staple of cash lineups as well. ETN against Baltimore is less interesting to me. That's not that great of a matchup, but he has 6,700 and his role is elite still. 2, James Conner, we saw last night, even in that loss, carried the ball 14 times, had 5 targets. His role is really, really good right now. Only 6,600, which, for what the touchdown upside we know he has, I don't think it's too bad in a pretty solid spot here. Chargers have been really bad against the run for a couple of years now. That's a good play. From there, you got David Montgomery, 6,400 against the Jets. Don't love that. Jets are a good defense, kind of the opposite of the Montgomery spot last year. Pierce will be in play after kind of killing everyone this past week. I was not too much on Dameon Pierce last week against Washington. Didn't love that spot. The spot against Miami is a little bit better, although I prefer to attack Miami through the air. After that, you got Jeff Wilson in the best matchup possible. We talk about this every week against Texans. You got Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. I think both of them will be in play, but this is Jeff Wilson's backfield right now. He'll be the popular play. He's sub 6K. He's going to be very chalky, I'm sure, but is a really good play. So you got Mostert as well. That I think is an interesting tournament pivot to him. Kenyon Drake did carry the ball 10 times last week. We projected him really well after Gus Edwards was out, but did disappoint. I wonder if the field will be off him a little bit here in a better matchup. I don't know if Gus Edwards will be back or what the deal will be there. Fournette is expected to be available for week 12, coming off the bye, coming off the hip injury. Yes, Rachaad White's eating into that role more, but this matchup really doesn't scare you too much, and he's sub 6K. I think he's an interesting pivot to people are going to be going to these 5K running backs, especially if Mixon's out. P. Ryan's going to be so popular. Foreman might get some love against Denver. Kenyon Drake's going to get some interest. And then, of course, Jeff Wilson will be popular. So I think Fournette might fall through the cracks just a little bit, although, obviously that's just guessing for me at first look here. And then you got the Washington guys against Atlanta once again. Brian Robinson ended up being real steamed up. The guy is just not an efficient runner. I was into it just because of the matchup last week, but if I'm going back to that, I'd rather go to Antonio Gibson, who's kind of got explosive upside, can make a big play, and is just a better overall runner. The Denver side of things is worth talking about as well, because Latavius Murray is only 5K, and that's pretty much their backfield right now. They did just release Melvin Gordon. They had to put Chase Edmonds dealing with an injury. So I don't know if they'll make another move at running back, but right now it's Latavius Murray's world, and we're all just living in it. He hasn't been necessarily efficient. I think his best days are behind him, but he's really all they got. And it's a matchup with Carolina that is okay. Not the best matchup in the world, not the worst. And he's 5K. So that's a really cheap price for an every down running back, basically. He's cheaper than Samaje Perine. I think that just about does the first look there at running back. Let's talk about receiver here. Tyreek Hill back on the main slate after the bye. He's setting records this season. He gets Houston here. I don't know if Derek Stingley is going to be back for Houston. Their good shutdown rookie corner. He was out last week. Which set up, Terry McLaurin's matchup a lot nicer. I think that doesn't really matter. Tyreek Hill's kind of unguardable, and he'll be refreshed coming off the bye, coming off one of his true only down games of the season, and he was still 15 points, found the end zone. The guy's got 40-point ceiling in him for sure. Devontae Adams, in what we perceive to be a bad matchup this past week against Pat Surtain and the Denver Broncos, was an excellent tournament play that no one played at 1%. We're coming 3 straight 30-point games for Devontae Adams. This matchup against Seattle doesn't scare you at all. I think they're finally figuring out they have to game plan through him, which took them a little bit too long to get there. But we're coming off very consistent numbers. We're 13, 14, 17 targets the last 3 weeks, 140, 126, 146 pass receiving yards, and then 5 total touchdowns in that time frame. As I mentioned, over 30 DraftKings points in all 3. I don't think we should overthink this Devontae Adams thing. Obviously, Kupp's still on the shelf. Hopkins last night, again, even in that loss, still 12 targets, 9 catches, 91 yards. You love to see it. Good spot here against the Chargers. Doesn't scare you too much. Jamar Chase is questionable to return. Might miss one more week this week. We'll see what happens. Keep an eye here. I don't mind being a week early. If he's out there, he's out there. He's still one of the best receivers in football. Waddle is obviously going to be in play with Tyreek. Texans have been solid against receivers, but if you're going into these Miami doubles, wouldn't blame you at all. T. Higgins was my favorite receiver play on the week last week. It did get there to almost 27 points, 9 for 148 through the air on 13 targets. If Burrow's out once again, I do not think he's expensive enough. It looks like they priced him down from 7,100 to 6,900, thinking that, hey, maybe Jamar Chase will be back. So either way, at 69, I think he's okay, even with Chase on the field, but it is a little pricey where we're kind of used to him being lower sixes to mid sixes with Chase on the field. But I like Higgins, especially if the field will overlook him a little bit. Saw Debo's ceiling game last night. Had a rushing touchdown, did catch 7 balls through the air. We know this range of outcomes. This is why you don't fade Debo on a main slate in any way, but as long as he's not 8K anymore, 6,800 mid sixes is more along the lines of where he should be. So, that's the deal with Debo Samuel. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin coming off the bye. I have no problem going into these Bucs stuff, and Godwin's still very cheap at 6K with a high volume. I'm sure he's going to be a cash receiver this week. Olave had a really nice game, 100 yards and a touchdown through the air. This is a little bit of a tougher spot with San Francisco. But as I mentioned, we just saw Hopkins be able to have success. The game script might go in his favor, and I don't think he'll be played very much. Christian Kirk, good bring back to any Baltimore stuff. Baltimore has been gashed through the air a lot of this year. We saw, but previous to the bye, he had a really, really strong game, the 2 touchdowns and 100 yards through the air. I think Christian Kirk in that mid-tier 6s will be in play. You got the Seattle guys certainly in play against Vegas. Amari Cooper coming off a fantastic game, like him a little bit less this week against Tampa Bay. But again, if you're going to want to play into the Bucs side of things, which I wouldn't blame you on, certainly can get into some Amari Cooper, who is having a really nice season for the Browns. A little bit up and down. We've seen floor games 6 points. We've also seen these 30 points and a lot of points in the high 20s. Going from there, Ayuk against New Orleans, similar to Debo, did find the end zone twice last night, only 2 catches, had a nice season. We'll see. I'm going to wait on the Chargers receivers. Let's see what happens with Mike Williams. But Keenan Allen's only 6,100. That's really too cheap. And he is a very good play this week. He lost a fumble last week, kept his price down a little bit, but still had 5 for 94 through the air. Could have been a much bigger game, 6 yards away from the bonus. I think Keenan, let's get a week early here on Keenan. I think Keenan's a very, very good play this week. As you go into the 5Ks, you got Boyd at 5,900, which would be a really nice price if Chase doesn't go. I'm not as into it if he does, unless you're doing Bengals stacks. I think he'll still be in play. McLaurin, really good matchup again, and is still very cheap. They brought his price down 100 after disappointing a little bit this past week, but a really good bounce back spot for him at home against Atlanta. Heineke was named the official starter there for rest of season. KC, we're going to want to play these KC stacks, but we have to wait and see on who's available. If Juju's available at 5,700, he's a good play. Sutton, another guy that let us down a little bit this past week. We liked his matchup, only 13 points. Gets a date with Carolina here. They have some good corners, so I don't love it as much in Carolina. It's fine. The Rams guys, Allen Robinson found the end zone last past week, but besides that, they all kind of disappointed between Allen Robinson, Ben Skoranek, and Van Jefferson. This week, I like them a little bit more because the game could get a little shootouty if you're playing into Chiefs stuff. I like them more in correlation, but I do think Robinson and Skoranek, I wouldn't be too scared of going back there. Their snaps are going to be there. And the offense isn't great, but the game script might have to be. And you see 32nd against receivers is our Kansas City for DraftKings points. Josh Palmer had a real breakout game, 8 for 106 and 2 touchdowns. That's funny, he had 8 for 106 against in week 9 as well. So 33 DraftKings points. If Mike Williams misses again, he'll certainly be on your radar. And then as you get down to these 5K plays, again, keep an eye out for value this week. I think it's a little bit less stringent than it has been in weeks past. There might be some 3K guys you can go to, and definitely keep an eye on our cheap wide receiver volume column that I'll be writing later in the week on establishedrun.com. All right, tight end. Do have some of the big names all on this slate: Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and George Kittle. For the first time in a while, not one of them in prime time. So Kelce is just a complete and total beast. The Rams have been pretty good at stopping tight ends over the past few years, but I don't think that matters much in this spot. Another 3 touchdowns last week. The guy is just he's breaking age models. It doesn't matter what his age is. He's a fantastic player. Mark Andrews, first game back last week, did still draw his 8 targets. I like Andrews here at 6,500. That's cheap for what his upside is. We know what his upside is because he's shown us multiple times this year, 28, 29, 22, 27. DraftKings points. He gets it done week in, week out. Really like Andrews in this spot. Kittle as well had a really nice game last night, which a lot of us were predicting, 4 for 84 and 2 touchdowns. Don't love this spot nearly as much. The Arizona matchup is fantastic. New Orleans, a little bit of a tougher spot, but at home here, I like Kittle just fine at 5,300. Really good player. And then Going down, I'll be looking at some value plays here. Njoku gets another week coming back from the injury. The high ankle sprain, Evan Silva always talks about it. It's hard to trust these guys coming back from them because it's kind of have to work themselves back into trusting that ankle again and feeling like themselves. So, a little bit tough to trust here, but don't mind the spot for Njoku against a Tampa Bay team that has had trouble stopping tight ends. Moreau, disappointed last week on 3 targets, but he is out there a lot in place of Darren Waller, and now he gets the Seahawks, which is a good matchup. So I like him. Dolchich, I don't mind against Carolina with a good spot. Noah Fant has been used way more in the passing game in the back half of the season here. And if you're going to play into Geno stuff, I wouldn't mind him as a part of a double stack. McBride's still the tight end there. Did get his 4 targets last night. Wanted a little bit more out of him in this game script. That should have been positive for Trey McBride, but at only 3,100 and with Zach Ertz out, I don't have a problem going back to this well, and I don't think that many people will in a good matchup. So I think that's something to consider. And then, you got some cheap punt options. You'll have Trey McKitty once again if Gerald Everett can't go. And it's an interesting slate. I think it's a little bit easier than the last 2 or 3 weeks to get kind of the lineups that you want in there. But overall, it'll be interesting. I know a lot of us will be looking forward to the Thanksgiving 3-game slate first. But, always good to get this first look, kind of comb through and see what we have going for us on the Week 12 main slate. Should be a fun one. I wish you all the best of luck on Week 12 main slate. I wish you the best of luck if you're playing the Thanksgiving slate. And I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Keep your eye on the ETR podcast feed for Adam Silva's solo pod and Adam and Evan's team-by-team pods for later today. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Establish a Million Thanksgiving edition tonight with Drew Dinkmeyer and Mike Leone will be free on this YouTube page. All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Wish you all the best of luck.